Okay, guys, welcome back to Costa Living. Thank you for tuning into my channel. We're all about helping you become financially independent, retire early, and create that residual income for you that's going to allow you to have money coming in whether or not you can work or not, and hopefully get you to early retirement stage. So, usually what we're trying to do is we try to release 3 videos a week at the most. We have a Fatherly Advice Friday and then a Monday matchup where we take a look at some of the videos that came out and highlight some of the key points in those videos. And then kind of most importantly, we have our, Build Your Wealth Wednesdays where we give you some practical advice and techniques and just strategies to kind of help build your wealth. Unfortunately, we didn't release a video last week, so we're going to kind of combine those in these videos and in this video here and try to kind of sum up everything for you that happened this last week.
It's all about to get smacked. This is so bad, and it's so bad for people trying to build their wealth.
So one of the things that I want to do is we try to stay away from politics on this channel. So the only time we really bring it in is when there's policies that are talked about, becoming law or things that are going to come into effect. And if those policies are going to affect your ability to become financially independent and retire early, then we want to bring them up to you just so that you're aware of them and some things that hopefully you can do to counter those. And unfortunately, that's the case this last week. There were some things that were brought up that are trying to get passed, that want to get passed, that are going to greatly affect your ability to help build your wealth. And possibly pass it on to your heirs and generate, really some legacy things that you can pass on to your kids. And so I want to cover those things. There's a couple major areas, and we want to address those. And we'll get into some of the videos too to show some reinforcement of some other guys and what they're saying about it. But before we get into that, I need to ask you for a favor. Can you help me triple D this video and website here and YouTube channel? So what I want you to do is really, help define this video by smashing that like button and then dropping a comment down below. And I do read them and I'll get back to you. And then kind of more importantly, if you can help me develop this channel by subscribing and just select that bell notification to be notified of new videos that come out. And then more importantly, help me deliver this video just by sharing it with someone who you think might benefit from this information. And the best thing of all, it doesn't cost you a dime, and it's free to you. So that's a double D on your triple D. So let's get into this information. So what am I talking about? What happened this last week?
This is literally tax the rich and kill the middle class's opportunities to build wealth. It's pretty freaking bad.
Well, Biden is trying to basically come up with ways to cover all these expenses that he's spending and that he's coming up with. And so he supposedly is talking about taxing the rich. And he says this for people that are making over $400,000. And I know that there's some of you out there that get, I'm nowhere close to that. I'm not going to worry about this. But you should be concerned about this. So let me tell you what he wants to pass and how it's going to affect basically the opportunity for you to build some wealth and to pass it on to your kids. So there's 2 main things that he's trying to do here. One is increase the capital gains cost, get rid of the 1031 exchange. And let me show you how this is really going to affect you. One of the biggest things is with the 1031 exchange, it's not only for property, it's for assets that you build. And for most assets that you have, you're not taxed on them until you actually sell them or transfer them. So when you have stocks, your stocks go up, your stocks go down, but when you're taxed on your stocks is when you actually sell them. Same thing with real estate. If you have investment properties, you're taxed when you sell them, not just for owning them. And same thing for businesses. When you sell your business is when you get taxed, and transfer ownership is when you get taxed. And historically, there's been something in the books that allows for stepped up basis. And what stepped up basis is if you hold on to something when you die, you're able to get the stepped up basis, and that's able to be passed on to your heirs. Now, where this really comes into effect is kind of for the middle class, kind of the business owners, the people that are building, kind of, they're not uber rich, but they're people that have invested their time, their money to try to build something, multiple properties, multiple businesses, and get to the point where they have a little nest egg that they can pass on to their heirs. And a lot of these are businesses that are generational. They've built up a business and now the son is taking over for the father and or mother, or whatever the situation is. And what happens is, if you're no longer to get this stepped up basis and you're taxed at the time that they get transferred, unfortunately you're going to force a lot of these businesses to sell because you can't pay the taxes. So if, let's say that a couple started a business and they invested $100,000 into this business, and they grew this business, and they bought a couple other locations, whether it be a restaurant or something else, and now this little restaurant empire that they were able to build is worth $2 or $3 million. Well, and when they die and they go pass that on to their next generation to take it over, they're going to get taxed on anything over $500,000. So now you're taxed at $2.5 million. Well, if you're paying taxes on the $2.5 million, you're not going to be able to transfer all of those assets to your kids. So what happens is you're going to have to sell some of it. And if you have multiple restaurants or something, well, I guess you're just going to have to close some of them or sell some of them to pay for the taxes. Where this really is going to come in is if you have, real estate and it's tied into, just one or two properties, and in order to pay those taxes, you're going to have to sell them off. If you're farming and, you want to pass the farm on to your kids, you're going to have to sell off some of the farmland to pay for those taxes. So this is where it's going to affect people in kind of every facet of income, because you have small businesses that you've been able to build up over 20, 30 years, and it's based on your cost basis of when you bought it, and now you're transferring it over to the next generation. So you're going to get hammered, and that's not having the stepped up basis. Now, with the stepped up basis now, the way that it is that when somebody dies, whatever the value is now is what they value the estate at. And so if you built this business up to $5-6 million, and when you die, it's valued at the $5 or $6 million. And again, why I'm saying that this protects the kind of the middle class is because you have the estate tax. This is federal, so every state's a little bit different. But for the federal estate, there's a federal exemption right now that it's $11 million as an individual, and you can 11.7, and you can double that for a couple. So if you have a husband and wife, they can exclude up to 23.4 23.4 million that they can pass on to the next generation of their businesses. And anything above that, so the uber wealthy that have hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, they're excluded from that already. The most that's excluded from estate tax is the 23.4. Now Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, they're adapting to cut that all the way down to $3.5 million. That's a drastic change from $3.5 million to 24. And some of you are thinking, well, $3.5 million, that's a lot of money. But look, if you bought a building in Portland and San Francisco and LA, any of these places that you bought a building to do your business, and maybe you bought it 15, 20 years ago for just a couple $100,000, it's very likely that can it be worth millions of dollars now. So just to transfer a business, just the value of that asset itself could throw you over that benchmark, and now your heirs have to pay taxes on it. So it's really going to put a lot of businesses out of business because they can't afford to transfer the business. And if you look at just the statistics of business in general, 20% of businesses don't even make it through the first year. And 50% of businesses are gone after 5 years. And there's just over 30% of businesses that even make it 10 years. So if you're able to beat the odds and last more than 10 years and be one of those 33% of the businesses, and now they're going to come after you. So for those of you guys that are just working, look at how long the company's been around that you're working for, and just know that the next generation, it might not be there anymore because they're going to get taxed out of existence when that tries to go to the next family member. So this is really crucial. Uh, and the same thing with real estate. Now let's get into the 1031 exchange. So the 1031 exchange is for investment property. And the same thing, they're going to hammer this at anything over $500,000. So historically, what can happen as an individual, this has kind of affected me, for example. So, I couldn't afford big, apartment complexes. So when you start out, you buy a house, and then you move into that house, and then eventually you can rent that house out and you buy another house. And then maybe you move up a little bit, and you can buy a duplex or a fourplex. And so you're trying to build your wealth over long term, and you're investing in long term to kind of build this wealth to pass on to the next generation. And so what happens is, again, for any asset that you buy, so maybe you bought something, again, in the Bay Area, or something that you inherited from or not inherited because that's going to be gone now, but if it's something that a grandparent has, but they bought it when they were young, it could be something that they paid $100,000, $200,000 for. If you look at what properties were selling for 30, 40 years ago, it was not uncommon to buy a house for $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And that same house that was $20,000, $30,000 before is now, $1 million or 1.2. And so what's going to happen is, traditionally, you can 1031 exchange that. So if you wanted to sell the house and not gain control of your own finances, so if you sold it, you didn't get the money. What you did is you rolled the money over to another investment, kind of like a 401k rollover. You're not cashing out, you're rolling it over into another investment. And so what this allowed people to do is it allowed you to either move, so maybe you're moving for a job, and now rather than sell this house, you can 1031 exchange it into another investment property close to where you live. Now this doesn't account for your primary residence. Your primary residence is excluded from this, and your primary residence, you already have that exclusion of $250 as an individual and up to $500 as a couple. So that's an exclusion that you can, if you make money on your home, you can exclude that from any taxes. But from an investment standpoint, what they're doing is they're capping off any 1031 exchange to a $500,000 profit. So if it goes up in value, anything over 500, you're going to be taxed capital gains wise on it. And where this really comes into effect is anybody that's buying larger properties. So, as you move up in the food chain, hopefully you get to the point where you're buying maybe a 12 unit or 20 unit or 30 unit, or maybe you're buying a small apartment complex. Well, where the money is in the larger units is when you can do some value add, is when you buy something and you start investing your own money to make improvements. You upgrade the apartment, you put in new carpets and new appliances or hardwood floors, you start remodeling to make it more efficient and nicer, and it allows you to increase your rents. So as you invest more money in it, the value goes up because you're also able to increase rents, and it's based on cash flow. So the more money that property brings in, the higher the value. So it's not uncommon to spend, $10, $15 million on an apartment complex and then fix it up, put more money into it, and get it to maybe be worth $20 million. Well, if you can't 1031 exchange into the next property, and now you're going to be taxed on that $5 million from as soon as you try to sell it, there's no incentive for big investors to buy larger properties. And that's where it's going to affect the individual, like ourselves, small people that are buying smaller properties. Because if you can't buy a large apartment complex and 1031 exchange it into the next deal or into 2 or 3 deals, then what's going to happen is you're going to stop buying large apartment complexes and just leave those to large institutional investors that just transfer the taxes onto their investors. So the medium investor is going to start buying single family homes, buy things where it's only going to go up in $500,000, and then I can dump it and not pay taxes. So once you start changing the game on that, it's going to drastically affect where people start putting their money. So you think single family is hard to buy now and there's a lot of competition? Wait till these investors start coming in more. I know they already started to, but they're also trying to invest in large, I'm looking at a larger unit right now. It's about 12 units. And my hope is to gain, increase the value, put some money into it and move up. But I got to tell you, if this plan goes through, I'm not going to buy it because my plan is to make that thing worth more than $500,000. And if I can't 1031 exchange it in the future and I can't get the write-offs, I'm going to buy 10 single families instead. So that's the issue with investors. If more people start buying the small single family units,
these larger, more potentially institutionalized investors are going to be much more incentivized to say, okay, well, rather than us buy a $20 million building, if we're going to have a 1031 exchange limit of, say, $500,000 on a property, why don't we just, or worse, per tax return per year? We don't know yet. We don't have the bill yet. Bill won't probably be out for a few weeks. But anyway, if that's the case, then these larger institutional buyers might be pushed into buying smaller deals because it would give them the opportunity to slice and dice out smaller deals and just go, okay, it's 2022, let's sell a few single family houses for a total of $500,000 in gains and exchange them. Or if it's per property, great. It's a lot harder to get to $500,000 in gains in a single family or condo than it is on a big multifamily building. You get somebody going, hey, do I want say 200 units worth $20 million in one building? Well, you're going to get $500,000 in gains really quickly. You'll be less incentivized to do 1031 exchanges. You'll be paying a whole lot more taxes. Or you divide it all up into single families. It's more work, but probably not for the syndicate anyway, because they're just going to hire a property manager. Property management rates are relatively the same, whether it's a single family or multifamily. In fact, sometimes you can get better deals on single family than you can on multi, because oftentimes there's less institutional competition for those single families. But what happens when all of a sudden single family homes, who today across the average are 90% of the time bought by people who want to live in the home? What happens when instead of 90% of people wanting to buy homes, all of a sudden, and live in them, we get only 50% of home buyers wanting to buy homes to live in them?
Supply and demand. You have all these people demanding the product and there's no supply. What does it do? It drives up the price. So you think you're outpriced now in the home market? Wait till this goes through.
But it also means that people are probably going to skew towards a desire for newer construction real estate, because if they're going to hold their real estate for the long term, they may as well start out with newer real estate rather than older real estate. Like if I was going to plan to hold real estate for 27 and a half years, I would rather buy that real estate as a new construction build now than buy a 1950s place, remodel it today, hold it for 27 and a half years, and over time I'm just gonna have to do more and more work. That roof's gonna come due, that plumbing's gonna come due if I didn't already upgrade it, that sewer's gonna come due if I didn't already upgrade it. I'd rather start with brand new. So you're gonna see more pressure on new construction real estate also. Okay, then we've talked about people holding longer, and we've talked about the middle class getting burned as corporate America comes in to take advantage of these 500,000 and under 1031 exchange rules. Folks, in my opinion, this is a complete disaster. These are really bad things for real estate. Hopefully they don't go through, because this is an extreme change for the real estate market. I don't even know what else to say.
So I wanted to bring this up to you guys because there's several things where this affects. Obviously, the market for single family is going to drastically start changing if this stuff goes through. You think things are overpriced now, it's going to be even worse. And the other thing that this is going to do for businesses that are having to incur these additional expenses, they're going to have to cover these expenses somehow. And how do they cover these expenses or the lack of tax savings? They're going to have to pass it on to the consumer. That's going to be higher rents, higher prices for the goods and services that you pay for. So what does that mean? That means inflation. So obviously, I've talked about this before with inflation. I said inflation is coming. You can't be pumping trillions of dollars into the economy and not have inflation show up. They try to tell you that inflation's not here, it's not coming, but guys, look at your bills. Look at how much you're spending on gas now versus a year ago, 2 years ago. Look at how much you're spending on food versus a year, 2 years ago. All these businesses that have been shut down, to come back, they're going to have to cover these expenses. You hear it all the time about restaurants that they can't get employees to show up, so they're going to have to start paying more.
If you guys are doing these 2 to 3, if you're employers, and I'm an employer, if you're looking at 2 and 3% wage increases, which is kind of the number, then and inflation is pushing close to that. That basically means that you're just maintaining your cost of living. You're not really getting an increase. All you're doing is getting more money to pay for goods that are also traveling at the same pace.
Your buying power is the same.
The same. Point is that we're pushing into this affordability issue. And I tell you what, I watched that show Nomadlands over the weekend, and I thought it was really good. But the one thing hit me in there is the woman was sitting there and she was on a fixed income of $550
a month. Yeah,
a month, and she was retired. And all I could think about was how horrible that is, because things are going up, and so it just squeezes people. So if people are on fixed rate incomes, or they're on things that are set, they're in big trouble. And that's kind of the whole point, is you guys need to be thinking about things that are inflation adjusted. We're seeing it on lumber. I got this wild graphic that showed the price of a deck, like just a deck for lumber. So in April of 2020, a 200 square foot deck for lumber, building the exact same, this is 1 year ago, was $936. In April of 2021, it was $3,695. So that's the difference. And so now, obviously, there's reasons around the lumber yards, and they shut down during the pandemic because they didn't want to have an excess supply, and now it's created kind of a shortage. And I don't know what people are smoking, but prices are going up.
Yeah.
And so, you just have to pay attention to the facts, not what people are saying.
So for you guys that are not working, I guess this is kind of my fatherly advice. I would start looking at getting back into the workforce, because what's going to happen as for, just investors that own businesses, when it gets to the point that the cost is so high to bring somebody back, they're going to find alternatives. And you're going to see this really in the restaurant industry. You've already started to see it over the last 4 or 5 years. You're going to have a lot more automation, a lot more kiosks, a lot more apps. So just look at the apps that you've been using now. Some of it because of COVID, but some of it because of a cost savings. You can use your favorite Burger King, Sonic, all these fast food restaurants now have apps where you can order on and go pick up your food at, when you show up. Why? Because they're trying to eliminate some of those expenses that they have. So for all of you guys fighting for the $15 minimum wage, this is really going to hurt with inflation. It's going to drive the cost up across the board. I understand wanting a livable wage, but there's a reason why you have a minimum wage job. It's a starting point. It's a place for people to build some skills, to get into the work environment. Traditionally you'd have 14, 15, 16-year-olds. I know it's almost difficult to get a job if you're not at least 16 nowadays. And again, that's kind of changed. But you have these people that obviously a 16-year-old doesn't even have a high school degree. They're barely starting to drive. Some of them, don't have cars if you can get a job at 15. And then you also have no skills. I mean, this is their first job. So there has to be an opportunity for people that don't have skills, they don't have the job history, where they can at least start building their skills and become more valuable to the businesses that they work for. And if you start eliminating that, or you start raising it so high that you can't afford to bring somebody in minimum wage, you're just going to eliminate jobs. Obviously, minimum is there for a reason. The word minimum, it's a starting point. Obviously I want people to make good money, but the idea is to increase your skills and to be worth something to move forward. And that's the whole idea. It should be low enough to give you incentive to move ahead and to get out of the situation that you're in. There's opportunity out there. There's a lot of people hiring right now, and a lot of them are above minimum wage. But anyway, I wanted to bring this to your attention. We'll go over some of the different videos that are out there, and we'll listen to some things from other people that are really hot on this. So Kevin talks about these areas here, and he's, a little bit more heated than I am over the situation.
The little guy gets screwed again. So the first way the little guy got screwed is long-term capital gains going away for those making over $1 million, less incentive to sell your real estate. You may as well just either sell before the rule goes into effect. Great, maybe there'll be a little temporary boost in inventory, but in the long run, less turnover. You're gonna see less people wanting to pay those tax bills, and you'll see that less turnover. 1031 exchange getting limited to 500K, more competition in the smaller space. And it also hurts people who are retired and have held on to the real estate for 20, 30, 40 years. And it hurts the little guy for their plans to be able to hold on to real estate for the long term. They'll be more likely to want to sell and incur those selling fees once they get to that 500K in gains, which again reduces their wealth because it forces them to make a transition when they didn't otherwise have to.
And again, you listen to some of the stuff, and like you said, it sounds like rich people complaining, but it's a genuine concern for the working class that are trying to build their wealth. You're taking away these opportunities. Look, for most of you guys that are out there that are making under six figures, which I'm assuming is probably most of you, it becomes very difficult to become financially independent if you're not able to invest in something, to have something grow. And they talk about, generational wealth. Well, if you're not able to build a little teeny nest egg and to pass it on to your kids or the next generation to give them a little bit of a boost, it's just going to keep people poor. You can't pass anything on. And this is for everybody. I want you guys to be able to build something and to pass that on to the next generation to give them a little bit of stepping stone. It's not about keeping the rich rich. It's about allowing the working class to become one of the rich, to work your way up. There's very few opportunities. One, you can invest tens of thousands of dollars every year into the stock market. And if you're in that kind of position where you can invest tens of thousands of dollars in the stock market, that's great. Over the long run, you can become financially independent doing that and work your job. In 30 to 40 years, you can become financially independent by putting money in the stock market. However, most people can't afford to do that. And so the other opportunity is to buy real estate. And when you can buy real estate and leverage other people's money, where you can tie up a $300,000 piece of property for under $10,000, that is a huge opportunity for somebody. When you can go in and you can buy a duplex or a triplex or fourplex for $400,000, and again, 3% down, that's $12,000. So for under $15,000, where you can go in and you can cover 3 of those rents to pay for all of your expenses, to pay for your mortgages, the upkeep, everything else, and you can essentially live rent-free by buying one piece of property, the ability for that to build your wealth is incredible. And to have them take this opportunity away from you guys, that's where I'm concerned. That's where you should be concerned too. Even if you're not utilizing this, it's the opportunity cost for your fellow, man and woman. It's obscene that they want to do this. It kind of makes me mad because it's taking away the opportunity for you guys. The uber wealthy are going to find ways around this. They're going to find holes, but it's that middle class. And again, I know 11.7 doubled, so you're talking $23.4 million. Sounds like a lot, but there's a lot of people in between that. There's a lot of people in the million to 20 million. That's the business makers. Those are the people that own most of the places where you guys work. That is, your small convenience store. That's your gas station. That's, your fast food, franchise where the guy, you need $1 million in assets to get in. Those guys aren't a lot of them, some are, but a lot of them, they're not worth, 30, $40 million. They're worth $5 or $6 million, and they own a franchise. They're the ones that provide your salaries. And if you're going after these guys, it's not going to be worth the investment to buy these, because they can't pass them on to their kids. They can't build anything and move it on. So this is going after your jobs. Look, if you work for a large corporation and stuff, there's enough loopholes for them that they can probably pass some of this stuff on to the consumer, which again gets us back to inflation. But there's a concern with this. I would be very concerned for you guys. So just be aware of it, and I hope this works out. We'll see what happens here in the next year. I don't think that some of this stuff is going to pass, because it's just drastically going to affect too much stuff. And you can't be penalizing the people that are going to generate the jobs and the people that are willing to risk their money by getting equity lines in their home, investing it in their properties, investing it in their businesses, trying to hire people. If you take away that little bit of hope and opportunity that they have, and that desire of, I think that I'm going to be one of those 3 out of 10 that can make it 10 years. And then if you start penalizing them after that, and it becomes, well, now I got to be 1 in 100 to make it, that risk versus reward just isn't going to be there. And it can really have some drastic long-term effects on this economy. So I hope more of us stand up and just share this video with somebody to let them know, look, if this stuff passes, it's really going to affect the jobs in the long run. And I don't wish that on anybody. So we'll see you next time. Just understanding how all of this stuff works, and how the economy is tied to the small businesses, and how the small businesses are going to affect you guys, how your work is going to go, how getting rid of this, the tax benefits and the 1031 exchange and the stepped up bases and the capital gains, and how that all affects your financial independence. Well, that's a cost of living. See you next time.